He humiliated me while I was pregnant, not knowing I'm the billionaire alpha's secret husband. I didn't know a room could turn against you so quickly. One moment, the conference hall was just glass and steel and polite murmurs, people in tailored suits pretending to listen, pretending to care. The next, it was a mouth. What? Hungry. Ready to swallow me whole. I stood at the center of it, under lights that were too bright, with a heartbeat that didn't belong to just me anymore. My hand hovered at my abdomen without permission, fingers curling instinctively, as if my body itself was trying to shield what I carried. The fabric of my shirt pulled tighter than it had yesterday. Or maybe I was imagining it. I'd been imagining a lot lately: tightness, heat, dizziness, the strange ache that settled low in my back when I stood too long. I told myself to breathe. No one had noticed yet. Or so I thought. The agenda on the screen blurred as I stepped forward, resignation letter folded neatly in my hand. I'd rewritten it 3 times last night, choosing words that sounded calm, professional, unoffended. I practiced my expression in the mirror: neutral eyes, lowered chin, the perfect Omega who knew his place and didn't inconvenience anyone. I had done everything right. Before we continue, Elliot Crane said, cutting me off mid-step. His voice carried. It always did, confident, practiced, sharpened by years of being listened to. The room stilled because when Elliot spoke, people assumed it mattered. I looked up. He was smiling. Not the kind he used with clients. Not the one he wore on magazine covers. This was smaller. Meaner. A smile that belonged to someone who believed he had already won. Yes. I said, my voice steady despite the faint tremor in my knees. Elliot's gaze dropped. Not to my face. To my stomach. The pause stretched, just long enough for others to follow his line of sight. I felt it then, the shift in attention, the subtle inhale of curiosity, the quiet recalculation that happens when a room senses weakness. I pressed my lips together. Is there something you'd like to share with everyone? Elliot asked lightly. Heat crawled up my spine. My suppressants had been wearing thin all morning, my sense slipping despite my best efforts. I could feel it, the faint sweetness in the air, the way a few alphas straightened unconsciously. I should have left. I should have turned around. But my legs wouldn't move. I'm here to submit my resignation, I said, holding up the letter. Effective immediately. A murmur rippled through the hall. Elliot laughed. It wasn't loud. That was the worst part. It was casual, dismissive, like my words were an amusing inconvenience. Resignation, he repeated. You don't usually quit without another offer lined up. His eyes flicked down again. Or maybe you do, he added. Given the circumstances. The room went quiet. I felt it then, the unmistakable shift inside me, the subtle roll and warmth that grounded me even as the world tilted. My Omega body didn't care about corporate decorum. It responded to life. I swallowed. I don't see how my personal circumstances are relevant, I said. Elliot tilted his head, mock thoughtful. Oh, I think they're very relevant, he replied. Especially when you're trying to play the responsible adult. He stepped closer. Too close. Tell me, he said, voice lowering just enough to sound intimate, how far along are you? The words landed like a slap. Someone gasped. Someone else chuckled nervously. I couldn't speak. My silence answered for him. Elliot straightened, lips curling with satisfaction. So it's true, he said. You're pregnant. The laughter came then. Not roaring. Not cruelly obvious. Just enough. Enough to burn. I scanned the faces around me, people I'd worked beside for years, people who borrowed my notes, people who smiled at me in the hallway. Some looked away. Some stared openly. A few wore expressions of thinly veiled judgment. No one spoke up. No one ever does. With what money? Elliot continued, folding his arms. Or are you planning to trap some poor alpha into paying for your mistakes? My fingers tightened around the letter until the paper crumpled. I'm married, I said. The words slipped out before I could stop them. For a split second, something flickered across Elliot's face. Surprise, maybe? Then he laughed again, louder this time. Married? He echoed. To who? A fantasy? More laughter. Don't tell me you expect alimony, he added. Or sympathy. My cheeks burned. My ears rang. I thought of the ring hidden beneath my shirt, cool against my skin, hanging from a thin chain like a secret too heavy to wear openly. I thought of a private office high above the city, of a man with silver eyes and a voice that never shook. I thought of the promise written in ink in silence. No one here knew. And they were never supposed to. I won't be staying, I said quietly. That's all. I turned to leave. Elliot's voice followed me, sharp and satisfied. Be careful, he said. This industry doesn't forgive Omegas who make poor choices. The door felt miles away. Each step sent a dull ache through my back, my balance off, my breath shallow. I kept my head down, counting the seconds until escape. 1, 2, 3. The laughter faded behind me, but the sound stayed lodged under my ribs, echoing with every heartbeat. When the doors finally closed, the hallway was empty. I leaned against the wall, one hand braced, the other instinctively returning to my stomach. My breath came uneven, chest tight, vision swimming. I'm okay, I whispered, to myself, to the life inside me, to the quiet promise I wasn't allowed to break. I wasn't okay, but I would survive. I always did. Because what they didn't know, what none of them could see, was that humiliation was not the end of my story. It was only the moment before everything changed. I used to believe marriages were loud things. Ceremonies. Witnesses. Rings worn openly on ends instead of hidden beneath fabric. I believed they came with celebration and permission. Permission to be seen, to be claimed, to exist without apology. Mine began in silence. The first time I met Lucien Vale, I didn't know his name. I only knew the pressure of his presence the moment he entered the room. An alpha's gravity, controlled and precise, like the air itself had learned to obey him. The private elevator doors opened without a sound, and suddenly the space felt smaller, more deliberate. I stood when instinct demanded it, suppressants doing little to calm the awareness curling low in my spine. Lucien stopped 3 steps away from me. Sit, he said. Not sharply. Not cruelly. Just certain. I sat. His gaze swept over me, not in the way alphas often looked at omegas, weighing, appraising, taking. This was different. Clinical. Careful. As if he were studying something fragile rather than something owned. You understand why you're here, he said. I nodded, hands folded tightly in my lap. My lawyer had explained it 3 times. A discreet union. Legal protection. Mutual benefit. Absolute secrecy. An omega in name and law only, given shelter beneath one of the strongest corporate empires in the country. A shield. Lucien Vale was not a man people married for love. He was a man people feared, negotiated with, tried and failed to outmaneuver. A billionaire alpha whose name made stock markets twitch and politicians lower their voices. I was a nobody. And yet he was looking at me like the choice mattered. I won't touch you without consent, he said calmly, as if discussing a business clause. I won't mark you publicly. I won't parade you. This is not ownership. My throat tightened. Then why me? I asked. Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Because you don't want to be seen, he replied. And because I don't want anyone close enough to hurt. That should have frightened me. Instead it felt like relief. The papers were signed that day. No flowers. No vows spoken aloud. Just ink, signatures and a ring placed in my palm. You don't have to wear it, Lucien said, noticing my hesitation. But it's yours. I threaded it onto a chain and hid it beneath my shirt. I didn't know then how often I would touch it just to remind myself I wasn't imagining safety. Living with Lucien was strange. There were rules but none that suffocated. I had my own wing. My own schedule. My own freedom to leave whenever I wanted. Staff treated me with polite distance as though they knew not to ask. Lucien was rarely home. When he was, the house felt different, not tense, not oppressive, just aware. Like everything was listening. Sometimes we ate together in silence. Sometimes we didn't see each other for days. And sometimes, unexpectedly, he noticed things. The way I flinched at raised voices. The way I preferred corner seats. The way my hands shook when my suppressants ran low. One night I forgot to take them. I woke drenched in heat, breath shallow, body aching with an unfamiliar pull. Panic set in before reason could catch up. I tried to stand, failed, pressed my face into the pillow to muffle the sound of my breathing. The door opened softly. Lucien stood there, already loosening his tie. You didn't take them, he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was concern. I'm sorry, I whispered, humiliation curling hot and sharp in my chest. I'll fix it. I just need. Lucien crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside the bed. Look at me, he said. I did. His eyes were steady, silver gray, reflecting restraint so intense it felt like a physical barrier between us. You don't owe me control, he said. Only honesty. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. He didn't touch me at first. He talked, grounding me, slowing my breathing, anchoring me to the present until the worst of it passed. Only then did he offer his hand. May I? He asked. No alpha had ever asked me that. I said yes. What happened between us that night wasn't violent or desperate. It wasn't the claiming the world expects from alphas and omegas. It was careful. Intentional. As if he were afraid to break me. After, Lucien sat at the edge of the bed, back straight, gaze distant. "This doesn't change the terms," he said. "Unless you want it to." I didn't answer. Because something had already changed. The pregnancy came quietly. No dramatic symptoms at first. Just exhaustion. Sensitivity. A strange sense of fullness that felt right. When the doctor confirmed it, my hands shook so badly I had to sit down. Lucien listened without interruption. When I finished, he said only one thing. "You're protected." I waited for conditions. For calculations. For regret. None came. But neither did public acknowledgement. The world wasn't ready. His enemies weren't blind. And I wasn't strong enough yet to be seen. So I stayed hidden. A secret husband. A concealed omega. A life growing in silence. And while others laughed at me, while Elliot Crane looked down on me like I was nothing, I carried the truth beneath my skin. A name no one dared mock. A bond no one could break. A future they had no permission to touch. And one day, they would know. I didn't cry when the doors closed behind me. Not in the hallway. Not in the elevator. Not when my phone buzzed with messages I didn't have the strength to read. I held myself together the way omegas learned to do early, spine straight, expression blank, heart locked behind practiced calm. The building's glass walls reflected a version of me I barely recognized. Pale, hollow-eyed, hand pressed subtly against my stomach as if to keep myself from coming apart. The elevator ride felt endless. Each floor that passed was another reminder that I was going down, out of respect, out of safety, out of the life I'd tried so hard to maintain. When the doors finally opened to the underground garage, the quiet hit me like a wave. No voices. No laughter. No judgment. Just the hum of lights and my own breathing. That was when my legs gave out. I caught myself against the car door, knuckles whitening as nausea rolled through me. For a moment, I worried I might be sick right there, that the humiliation would follow me even into this empty space. "Easy," I whispered, though no one was there to hear it. I slid into the driver's seat and sat there with my forehead resting against the steering wheel, counting breaths like the doctor taught me. The baby shifted. It was small, barely more than a flutter, but it was enough to make my chest ache. I covered my stomach fully now, no longer pretending. No one was watching. "I'm still here," I murmured. "I've got you." The drive home blurred past me. Traffic lights changed. Streets I knew by heart passed without recognition. My phone buzzed again and again, but I didn't answer. I couldn't bear the thought of explanations, of defending myself against words that had already been sharpened into weapons. By the time I reached the house, my hands were shaking. Lucien's home was always quiet, but tonight it felt cavernous. Too large. Too empty. The kind of silence that amplifies every thought until they echo. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, the weight of the day crashing down all at once. The laughter replayed in my mind. Elliot's voice. The glances. The unspoken agreement that I deserved it. My knees buckled and I slid down the wall, clutching my stomach as a sob tore loose before I could stop it. It wasn't pretty crying. It was gasping, broken, ugly years of swallowed shame forcing its way out all at once. I pressed my face into my sleeve, trying to muffle the sound even though I was alone. "I did everything right," I whispered. "I tried so hard." The words tasted bitter. I thought of every late night, every extra task, every moment I'd smiled through condescension just to prove I was useful. I thought of how carefully I'd hidden my marriage, my happiness, my fear, how I'd shrunk myself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold me. And still it hadn't been enough. The front door opened. I didn't hear Lucien's footsteps at first. I only felt the shift in the air, the way the house seemed to draw a breath. Then his voice, low, controlled, edged with something dangerous. "Who did this?" I looked up. Lucien stood a few feet away, coat still on, tie loosened. His eyes were fixed on me, pupils blown wide, alpha presence flaring in a way I'd only felt once before, when someone threatened something he cared about. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. He crossed the distance in seconds and knelt in front of me, careful not to touch, though his hands hovered close, trembling with restraint. "Talk to me," he said. The dam broke. I told him everything. The meeting. The laughter. Elliot's words. The way the room had turned cold around me. My voice cracked as I described the looks people gave my stomach, the way they assumed the worst without hesitation. I didn't spare myself the humiliation. I didn't soften it. Lucien listened without interrupting. His jaw tightened with every word. A muscle ticked near his temple. The air around us felt heavy, charged, like the moment before a storm. When I finished, silence stretched between us. Lucien reached out then, slowly, deliberately, and cupped my face. I leaned into his touch without thinking. "Do you want me to end him?" he asked quietly. "Not fire him. Not discipline him. End him." The sheer finality of it made my breath hitch. I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "Not like that." His thumb brushed beneath my eye, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were still falling. "Tell me what you want," he said. I swallowed. "I want him to know," I said. "I want him to understand what he did. I don't want him crushed in the dark, I want him to see it coming." Lucien studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "As you wish." He helped me to my feet, one arm steady around my back. As we moved, a wave of dizziness hit me and I swayed. Lucien's grip tightened instantly. "Easy," he murmured. "You're not alone." That simple sentence undid me more than the humiliation ever had. He guided me to the couch and sat beside me, one hand resting protectively over my stomach, as if daring the world to try again. "You don't ever have to prove your worth," he said quietly. "Not to him. Not to anyone." I rested my head against his shoulder. For the first time since the laughter started, my breathing slowed. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware, uncaring. But inside that quiet house, something shifted. The shame that had clung to me all day loosened its grip, replaced by something steadier. Resolve. They had laughed at me. They would not laugh again. Not when the truth finally stepped into the light. If humiliation is loud, then victory, at least the kind Elliot Crane believed in, is smugly silent. The days after the conference passed with an eerie calm. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just whispers that followed me through corridors, messages that stopped just short of cruelty but carried the same weight. My resignation was accepted within hours, as if they'd been waiting for an excuse to erase me. I stopped going to the office. Instead, I stayed home, nested in quiet rooms and half-drawn curtains, my body slowing as the pregnancy demanded more of me. Some mornings I woke nauseous, palms pressed to my mouth, sweat damp along my spine. Other days I felt oddly peaceful, like my body had decided that the outside world no longer mattered. Lucien adjusted without comment. Meetings were rescheduled. Calls moved. Security doubled, subtly, professionally, like it had always been that way. He never hovered, but he was always there. A glass of water appearing beside me. A blanket when I fell asleep on the couch. His presence was steady enough to lean on without fear of collapse. Elliot, meanwhile, flourished. At least that's how it looked online. Photos of him smiling beside executives. Posts celebrating new opportunities. Articles praising his leadership. The comments were full of admiration, the kind that made my stomach twist. I didn't tell Lucien how often I checked. I didn't tell him how each update felt like salt pressed into a wound. One afternoon, while I sat by the window with my feet tucked beneath me, Lucien paused mid-call. His eyes narrowed, not at the screen but at something only he could hear. "Cancel my afternoon?" he said calmly. "Yes. Everything." He ended the call and turned to me. "Vale Industries is acquiring Crane Solutions," he said. The words didn't register at first. I blinked. "What?" "The board approved it this morning," Lucien continued, tone casual as if discussing the weather. "The announcement will be public by tomorrow. Crane Solutions. Elliot's company." My breath caught. Lucien watched my face carefully, not for excitement, not for satisfaction, but for discomfort. "This doesn't move forward unless you're certain," he said. "I can stop it." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "I want to see it." The next morning the city buzzed. Financial networks lit up with headlines. Social feeds exploded with speculation. An acquisition by Vale Industries wasn't just business, it was a declaration. A swallowing of power so complete there would be nothing left untouched. Elliot didn't call me. But I knew he knew. By afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I didn't answer. Lucien's assistant called instead. "Your presence has been requested at the board briefing," she said politely. "Mr. Vale would like you there." My heart raced. "I don't work there anymore," I said automatically. There was a pause. "You're not attending as staff," she replied. "You're attending as family." The boardroom was larger than the one Elliot had humiliated me in. Longer table, darker wood, windows that overlooked the entire city. The kind of room built for men who never doubted their right to take up space. I hesitated at the door. Lucien stood inside already, jacket perfectly tailored, expression unreadable. When his eyes met mine, something softened, Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for me. He held out a chair beside him. Not across. Not behind. Beside. The board members murmured as I took my seat. Curious glances flicked my way, quickly masked. They all knew better than to ask. The door opened again. Elliot walked in. He looked confident, until he saw me. The change was subtle but unmistakable. His stride faltered. His gaze darted to Lucien, then back to me, confusion flickering across his face like a cracking glass. What is he doing here? Lucien didn't look at Elliot. Let's begin, he said. The presentation was efficient. Merciless. Numbers laid bare. Control transferred. Authority rewritten. Elliot tried to speak twice. Both times Lucien cut him off with a raised hand. Questions will come later, Lucien said coolly. I watched Elliot's confidence unravel thread by thread. The room no longer belonged to him. Every word he offered landed flat, ignored or dismissed with polite indifference. At one point his gaze drifted back to me. Recognition sparked. The way Lucien's hand rested lightly on the table near mine. The way the room subtly deferred to my presence. The way Lucien's attention always returned to me no matter who was speaking. Understanding dawned, slow, horrifying. The meeting ended. As people filed out, Elliot stood frozen, knuckles white at his sides. Lucien rose. So, Elliot said hoarsely. This is about him. Lucien finally turned. No, he replied. This is about you. Elliot swallowed. I didn't know, he said weakly. If I had. Lucien stepped closer, his presence pressing down like gravity. You knew enough, he said. You chose cruelty anyway. Elliot's eyes flicked to my stomach. Something like fear crept in. Lucien followed his gaze. Do not look at my husband like that, he said quietly. The word hit Elliot like a blow. Husband, he whispered. Lucien slipped an arm around my back, protective without being possessive. Legally married, he continued. And carrying my child. The room seemed to tilt. Elliot stumbled back a step, face draining of color. I didn't know, he repeated. Lucien's voice dropped, each word precise. You laughed at my spouse, he said. You humiliated the parent of my heir. You did it publicly. Lucien leaned in just enough for Elliot to understand the danger. And now, he finished, you work for me. Lucien guided me out without another glance. As the doors closed behind us, my knees trembled, not with fear, but with the sudden release of tension I hadn't realized I was still holding. Lucien squeezed my hand once. The man who thought he'd won, he said quietly, has just realized he never stood a chance. For the first time since that day in the conference hall, I smiled. Not because Elliot was afraid, but because I was no longer. If the boardroom had been the moment Elliot began to understand, then the gala was where the truth was carved into the world, slowly, deliberately, with no room left for denial. Lucien did not enjoy galas. He tolerated them the way one tolerates storms, aware of their inevitability, prepared to endure, unwilling to be careless. When Vale Industries announced the acquisition, every powerful figure in the city suddenly remembered prior commitments that placed them exactly where Lucien would be. Attendance was not optional. The invitation arrived embossed, heavy in my hands, like it carried weight beyond paper. My name was printed beside Lucien's. Not guest. Not associate. Just my name. I stared at it for a long time before folding it carefully and setting it down. Do I have to go? I asked quietly that evening. Lucien looked up from his tablet. You don't, he said immediately. If you'd rather stay home. I want to, I interrupted. The word surprised both of us. I rested my hand on my stomach, feeling the gentle, grounding presence there. I don't want to hide tonight. Lucien studied me, something unreadable passing through his eyes. Then we won't, he said. The night of the gala, the city glittered. The venue was a historic building of marble and glass, lights spilling out into the street like something alive. Cars lined up, expensive and polished, doors opening to release laughter and perfume and practiced confidence. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror in the car window. I barely recognized myself. The suit Lucien had chosen was tailored to accommodate my pregnancy without trying to conceal it. Clean lines, soft fabric, nothing apologetic about it. My sense suppressants were lighter than usual. Not gone, but no longer strangling me into invisibility. Lucien stepped out first, then turned and offered me his hand. I took it. The cameras noticed immediately. Flashes burst like lightning, murmurs rippling through the gathered crowd. I could feel the questions forming before they were spoken. Who is he? Why is Lucien Vale holding his hand? Lucien didn't slow. He didn't tighten his grip either. He let me walk beside him, not dragged, not hidden. Inside, the ballroom was alive with music and crystal light. Conversations faltered as we passed, eyes following us in open curiosity. I felt exposed, my heart pounding, breath shallow, but Lucien's presence anchored me. His thumb brushed once against my knuckles. "I've got you," he murmured, so softly only I could hear. We moved deeper into the room. And then I saw him. Elliot stood near the bar, surrounded by people who laughed too loudly at his jokes, desperate to stay in his good graces now that his future depended on Lucien's favor. He looked polished, confident, until his gaze found us. The smile slid off his face. Confusion came first, then disbelief, then a creeping dread as understanding clawed its way in. I didn't look away. For the first time, I let him see me fully, standing tall, unashamed, my pregnancy visible, my hand firmly clasped in Lucien's. Elliot excused himself abruptly, glass trembling in his grip. The orchestra softened as Lucien guided me toward the center of the room. A subtle gesture, barely noticeable, but conversations quieted, attention drawn inexorably toward us. Lucien accepted a microphone from an attendant. The room stilled. "I won't keep you long," Lucien said, voice calm, carrying effortlessly. "Tonight is meant to celebrate a new chapter for many of us." Polite applause followed. "But before we continue," he added, pausing just long enough to command silence again, "there is someone I wish to introduce." His hand tightened around mine. "My spouse." The word rippled through the room like a shockwave. Gasps broke out. Whispers flared and spread. I felt 1,000 eyes settle on me, weighing, measuring, reassessing everything they thought they knew. Lucien turned slightly toward me, his gaze steady and warm. "My legally wedded husband," he continued, "and the Omega carrying my child." For a heartbeat the world stopped. Then the room erupted. Voices overlapped, disbelief mixing with awe. Cameras surged forward, flashes blinding. I caught sight of Elliot across the room, his face drained of color, glass slipping from his fingers to shatter on the floor. Lucien didn't flinch. He angled his body subtly in front of me, shielding without hiding, one hand resting protectively over my stomach. "This isn't an announcement I make lightly," he said. "But it is one I make without regret." Silence returned, this time reverent. "My family has always existed," Lucien continued. "I simply chose to protect them privately. That ends tonight." The weight of his words settled over me like something solid and warm. I felt seen. Not exposed. Not judged. Questions were shouted, but Lucien ignored them. He set the microphone aside and turned fully to me. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. I nodded, throat tight. "Yes," I whispered. "I am." He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to my temple. The cameras went wild. Somewhere behind us, Elliot tried to leave. Security stopped him. Lucien didn't even look his way. He guided me toward a quieter side room, away from the noise and frenzy. My legs shook as the adrenaline faded, but Lucien's arm remained steady around me. Once the door closed, the quiet rushed in. I let out a shaky breath I'd been holding for weeks. I was scared, I admitted. Lucien cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. "So was I," he said. "But fear doesn't get to decide our lives." Tears blurred my vision. Not from pain, not from shame, but from the overwhelming release of being claimed without condition. Outside that room, the world was rewriting its understanding of me. Inside, Lucien rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "No one will ever laugh at you again." And for the first time I believed him. Because the truth had finally stepped into the light. And it wasn't cruel. It was powerful. The aftermath of the gala did not arrive like a storm. There were no screaming headlines, no dramatic public firings announced in anger, no humiliating exposés dragged through the media for entertainment. If anything, it was quieter than anyone expected. And that was how I learned what real power looked like. The morning after the gala, I woke to sunlight filtering through half-drawn curtains and the steady, grounding presence of Lucien beside me. He was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching me with an expression I rarely saw in daylight, unarmored, thoughtful. "You didn't sleep much?" he said. I smiled faintly. "Neither did the city." He huffed softly, brushing a thumb across my knuckles. "True." My phone lay face down on the nightstand, buzzing intermittently like a restless insect. Messages had piled up overnight. Numbers I didn't recognize, names I did, all suddenly desperate for acknowledgement. I didn't reach for it. Lucien noticed. "You don't have to read any of it," he said. "I know," I replied. But I want to understand what's happening. He nodded as if he'd expected that. Then let me explain it properly, he said. We moved to the sitting room, where morning light softened the edges of everything. Lucien poured tea, my tea the kind I liked, prepared without asking, and set it carefully in my hands before sitting across from me. Elliot won't be publicly ruined, Lucien began. I tensed without realizing it. He will, however, be finished. Lucien didn't say it with satisfaction. He said it like a fact. His contracts are under review, Lucien continued. Not terminated, just reconsidered. His authority within the company has been restructured. Quietly. Incrementally. What does that mean? I asked. Lucien met my eyes. It means every decision he makes now requires approval from someone who does not respect him. A chill ran through me. He won't be fired, Lucien added. At least not yet. That would make him a victim. Instead, he'll be irrelevant. I thought of Elliot, the way he thrived on attention, on dominance, on the certainty that he mattered. Irrelevance would destroy him. Lucien leaned forward slightly. Power doesn't need to announce itself, he said. It removes options until there's only one left. I swallowed. And the rumors? I asked. The ones about me? Lucien's jaw tightened. They're already fading, he said. People don't enjoy standing on the wrong side of history. The truth of that settled slowly. Within days it became obvious. Articles that once praised Elliot were quietly edited, then removed. Invitations stopped arriving. Calls went unanswered. His name, once spoken eagerly, began to draw polite discomfort instead. No one defended him. No one ever does. Meanwhile, my own name, once whispered with disdain, shifted in tone. Curiosity replaced judgment. Respect replaced mockery. I wasn't suddenly beloved, but I was untouchable. Still, it wasn't the external changes that unsettled me most. It was the internal ones. I found myself flinching less, standing straighter, meeting eyes instead of lowering my gaze. I stopped apologizing for existing. One afternoon I caught myself laughing, really laughing, at something small and stupid, the sound surprising even me. Lucien paused mid-step, watching me with quiet intensity. There it is, he said. What? I asked. You, he replied. Unburdened. The word echoed. Unburdened. That night, I confessed something I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I'm afraid, I admitted as we lay together in the dim quiet, his hand warm and steady over my stomach. Not of Elliot. Of becoming someone else. Lucien was silent for a moment. Power changes people, he said carefully. But only if they confuse it with worth. I turned toward him. And you? I asked. What does it change in you? Lucien's gaze softened. It reminds me why I built everything in the first place, he said. So no one could take what matters from me. From us. The days passed. Legal matters resolved themselves without my involvement. Decisions were made, consequences enacted, all without spectacle. Elliot faded from my thoughts, not because he was forgiven but because he no longer mattered. One afternoon as I rested on the couch, Lucien knelt beside me and pressed his forehead to mine. You did nothing wrong, he said quietly. I need you to know that. Emotion swelled in my chest. I know, I replied. Now. Outside, the city continued its endless motion. But inside our walls, something had settled into place, a sense of safety so complete it felt unreal. I had always believed strength meant enduring quietly. I was wrong. Strength was being protected without being diminished. And power? Power wasn't loud. It didn't laugh. It didn't humiliate. It simply decided, and moved the world accordingly. There is a strange silence that comes after the storm, not the peaceful kind but the uncertain one. The kind where you wait for the next blow, even when everything appears calm. That was where I found myself in the weeks after the gala. The world had changed. And yet, part of me still moved as if it hadn't. I caught myself hesitating before stepping into public spaces, fingers tightening around Lucien's sleeve as though someone might still point and laugh. Old instincts die slowly. Humiliation leaves a bruise you can't always see, one that aches long after the impact fades. Lucien noticed, of course. He always did. You don't have to push yourself, he said one morning as I paused at the doorway, the sun spilling warmly across the floor. We can leave whenever you want. I shook my head. I don't want to leave, I replied. I want to arrive. The word felt heavy, deliberate. Lucien studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Then we'll do it your way. My way turned out to be slower than the world expected. The first step was small, A walk through the city hand in hand, no security visible unless you knew how to look. People noticed us. Some stared openly. Others pretended not to. No one laughed. That alone felt unreal. I felt the weight of my pregnancy more now. My body changing daily, my balance shifting, my energy dipping unpredictably. Lucien adjusted without comment, shortening our walks, matching my pace, offering his arm when sidewalks grew uneven. "Are you tired?" he'd ask. Sometimes I was. Sometimes I just needed to stand still and breathe. We passed a cafe with outdoor seating and on impulse I stopped. "I want to sit there," I said. Lucien followed my gaze. It was ordinary. Public. Exposed. "All right," he said. We sat. I felt every glance like a physical touch at first. My shoulders tensed, my breath shallow. But nothing happened. No whispers sharp enough to cut. No pointing fingers. Just curiosity. A young Omega smiled at me from another table. An alpha across the street nodded respectfully at Lucien, and then at me. Something inside my chest loosened. After that, I stopped hiding my pregnancy. I wore clothes that didn't disguise it. I let my scent exist naturally, no longer strangled by suppressants meant to make me smaller. I stood beside Lucien at events, not behind, not as an afterthought, but as his equal in presence if not in power. The media tried to frame me at first. Questions came carefully wrapped in politeness. How does it feel to suddenly be in the spotlight? Were you afraid of public reaction? Do you feel protected now? Lucien deflected most of them. But one day he looked at me and asked, "Do you want to answer?" I thought of Elliot's laughter. Of the way I'd swallowed my voice for years. "Yes," I said. The interview was brief. When the reporter asked how it felt to be married to one of the most powerful alphas in the world, I answered honestly. "It feels safe," I said. But safety isn't the same as silence. The quote spread faster than I expected. Messages poured in, not from people who wanted proximity to power, but from Omegas who had lived in fear, who had been laughed at, dismissed, erased. "Thank you for existing openly. I didn't know we were allowed to be protected. I didn't know we could choose more." I cried over those messages. Lucien held me while I did, one hand resting over my stomach, grounding me in the present. "You're changing things," he murmured. "No," I said softly. "I'm just refusing to disappear." That refusal cost me something. There were invitations I declined because I wasn't ready. Spaces that still felt too sharp, too crowded. Days when I stayed home, overwhelmed by the weight of being seen after so long in hiding. Lucien never pushed. He sat with me in the quiet. He listened. He let me set the pace. One evening, as we stood on the balcony watching the city lights flicker on, I asked him something that had been weighing on me. "Do you ever wish we'd stayed hidden?" I asked. Lucien didn't answer immediately. "No," he said finally. "But I wish the world had been kinder to you before it learned your name." I leaned into him, pressing my forehead against his chest. "I used to think being seen meant being hurt," I admitted. "Now I think it just means being real." He kissed my hair. "You were real even when no one was looking," he said. The day I walked into a room alone, no Lucien beside me, no security in sight, I realized how far I'd come. Conversations paused. Eyes turned. But this time I didn't shrink. I smiled. I introduced myself. I existed. When I came home that night, Lucien was waiting. "How was it?" he asked. I rested his hand over my stomach, feeling the gentle shift beneath his palm. "I chose to be seen," I said. "And I survived." Lucien smiled, soft, proud, unmistakably mine. And in that moment I understood something I'd never been taught. Visibility isn't vulnerability when you're no longer alone. It's power of a different kind. The kind that begins within. The first contraction didn't feel like pain. It felt like pressure, deep, insistent, unfamiliar. I woke from sleep with my hand already on my stomach, breath catching as my body tightened around something older than fear. Lucien was awake instantly. "What is it?" he asked, already sitting up, already alert. "I think," I whispered, then paused as another wave rolled through me, stronger this time. "I think it's time." There was no panic in him. No raised voice. No frantic movement. Only certainty. Within minutes, the house was quietly alive. Lights soft, footsteps controlled, voices low. Lucien helped me dress with careful hands, murmuring reassurances meant as much for himself as for me. "You're safe," he said. "I'm here." The drive to the hospital passed in fragments. Streetlights blurring. My breathing counted and guided. Lucien's hand never left mine, his thumb pressing steady circles into my skin every time the pain crested. When we arrived, staff moved with practiced efficiency, but there was something else too. Recognition. Respect. Not fear. I wasn't invisible here. Labor was long. Longer than I expected, longer than I thought I could endure. Pain came in waves that stole my breath, demanded everything I had and more. There were moments I thought I would break, moments when tears soaked my face and my voice cracked from calling Lucien's name. Each time he answered, right there, right then. I'm not going anywhere, he said again and again, forehead pressed to mine, voice steady even when mine wasn't. At some point, exhaustion blurred the edges of everything. Time lost meaning. All that existed was sensation and sound and Lucien's presence anchoring me through it all. And then, a cry. Sharp, small, perfect. The sound cut through the pain like light breaking through clouds. I sobbed then, not from hurt, but from overwhelming release. From relief so intense it felt like grief leaving my body all at once. Lucien laughed softly, a broken, disbelieving sound I'd never heard from him before. They're here, he whispered. The nurse placed our child in my arms, warm and real and impossibly small. Their fingers curled instinctively, gripping my skin as if they knew me already. Everything else fell away. The room. The past. The pain. I pressed my forehead to that tiny head and breathed them in, tears slipping freely now. I've got you, I whispered, the same words I'd used months ago in a silent parking garage. I always will. Lucien stood beside me, one hand resting protectively over both of us, his composure finally cracking. His eyes shone, his jaw trembling as he bent and pressed a kiss to my temple, then to our child's head. My family, he said, voice thick. Recovery was slow. My body ached in new ways, demanded rest I wasn't used to giving. Lucien enforced it gently but firmly, taking over where he could, learning the rhythm of feeding, sleeping, soothing. He was awkward at first, too careful, too restrained, but the moment our child quieted against his chest, something in him shifted. He smiled. A real one. The days blurred into a new kind of time. No boardrooms. No headlines. No power plays. Just quiet rooms filled with soft breathing and the steady beat of a future unfolding one moment at a time. I watched Lucien one evening as he cradled our child, his usually sharp presence softened into something almost reverent. You're good at this, I said. He glanced up, surprised. I'm terrified. I smiled. So am I. That fear felt different than the ones I'd known before. It wasn't rooted in shame or helplessness. It was rooted in love. Weeks later, when we finally stepped outside as a family, the world looked the same, but I wasn't. People looked at us differently now. Not with curiosity alone, but with something gentler. Acceptance maybe. Understanding. I thought back to the conference hall. To the laughter. To the way I'd shrunk under the weight of it. I thought of the person I'd been then, quiet, hidden, convinced survival meant silence. I was wrong. I wasn't weak. I wasn't foolish. I wasn't lesser. I was patient. I was resilient. I was strong enough to endure until it was safe to bloom. One night, as Lucien and I stood by the crib watching our child sleep, I voiced the truth that had settled into my bones. I thought humiliation had broken me, I said. But it didn't. Lucien wrapped an arm around me. It revealed you, he said softly. I leaned into him, the past finally loosening its hold. I wasn't just the Omega who'd been laughed at. I wasn't just the secret husband. I wasn't just the protected one. I was a survivor, a partner, a parent, and everything I was becoming. I had been all along.